Hey everyone, welcome to today's video. Today I'm going to be showing how we send and receive messages through queues and topics using message sessions on Azure Service Bus. So we're going to go in, take a look at the portal, have a look at how we've got a kind of queue and a topic and a subscription set up, and then we'll dive into Visual Studio and do some experiments about how we have to configure things to send and then what difference that makes to how we receive. So let's jump on over and take a look. Okay, so here we are in Azure Service Bus. In the portal, I'm looking at my Service Bus namespace. I'm going to jump to queues. We can see I've got some queues here. What I've done is I've set up a queue called Session Queue, and I've enabled Session on it. So I've ticked that box there, typed in my queue name, and then I've got this Session Queue. So I'm going to jump over and take a look at that queue. Right now, there's nothing in it at all. And so what we'll do is we'll jump over to Visual Studio and take a look at some of the code that we've got. So I've got this kind of two applications set up that I've used before. So I've got this application that's going to start sending messages to Service Bus, and then it's going to spawn some child processes that will subscribe to Service Bus for us. And so I have a process that's running, and a process running that's sending, and a process running that's subscribing. And then if I type up into the first program, it will spawn a second or another subscribing application. I can keep typing up, it'll keep spawning new ones, and I can type down, it'll kill the last one that it made, and so we can dial down again. And this is just how we've explored the idea of competing consumers before. We're going to do the same thing here with sessions. I've got some variables up here that will hold my Service Bus connection string, the queue name, the topic name, description name, stuff like that, and then set those kind of the connection stuff up. Here I'm creating a connection to Service Bus and then using a sender. I'll zoom in just a touch more. I've got this variable about the number of customers I've got. So in this demo, we're going to fake the idea that it's we're doing sessions based on customer ID, and so I've got it configured here to have 10 customers. I'm making an array of events that's going to hold the current kind of message number per customer, so we can send them, as I send messages for customer 1, it will say this is message 1, this is message 2, this is message 3, and then for customer 2, I have that same in order kind of count going on inside the message, so we can easily keep track of whether we're receiving messages in order for the different customers, stuff like that. And then I've got this send loop, the way you kind of expect, and then I'm kind of randomly generating a customer number, incrementing this is a new message for that customer number, and then saying this is message number X for that customer. I'm putting the customer number in, and then here I'm setting the session ID to that customer ID. And so this is a kind of really important line. What I'm going to do is I'm going to comment that out to begin with, and then I'm just going to run the application. We'll see the black box appear, and then we immediately get an error message that's come up. It says the session ID was not set on a message and it cannot be sent to the entity. Entities that have session support enabled can only receive messages that have the session ID set to a valid value. So that's just a little tip. If you turn on sessions for a queue, you have to set the session ID from now on. And so that's what we're going to do. So we're going to do that down here as well. When we type in a value, so when I type in like any text, it will break it up by strings and send that as well. And we're going to set that to a session ID called typed. So let me start the program again. This time we'll be setting the session ID. Hold on. Let me restart that. So I can type up, and we started a consumer. And what we see here, actually what I should have showed kind of beforehand, if I jump over to the consuming application, I'll stop this running for a second. We've got the regular consuming application, except instead of starting a session Service Bus processor, I'm using a session processor. So Service Bus session processor. It's in the same namespace. You create it almost the same way. Instead of making Service Bus processor options, you make Service Bus session processor options, and then you call create session processor. In the session processor options, we get to set this variable max concurrent sessions. This will set how many sessions our consumers are allowed to take up. I'll comment that out for now. I think the default is 8. And then what we're doing is we've got the same process message async and process error async handlers for our Service Bus session processor, but we've also got these extra couple of events we can subscribe to, which is session initializing and session closing. And so for each of those, I'm just logging out that they got called and what the session ID was that we got in the arguments. And so what happened is the session initializing will get called when our processor has picked up a session from Service Bus. So we're going to hit Service Bus and say, I want to consume sessions. Service Bus will allocate us a session that's not allocated to somebody else. And then we'll call the initializing method for us. And then we'll start getting the processing coming in. If for whatever reason we kind of end our lock on that session, then the session closing method will get called. And we can kind of show that happening a bit later on. So I'm going to run the application again, and I'll type up again. And then what we start to see is that we started the processor, and then the session initializing has been called for typed, which is the up message that I typed in, some other messages that I've typed in, and then also for session ID 6. And so here, if I type up again and launch one more, then we're getting one that started commenting out that 2 didn't actually take effect. So this one started for 5 and 7. If I do up, this one started for 4 and 8. And so one thing we'll notice here is because I've got more sessions. I've got 10. Remember, I've got 10 sessions actively kind of running on my messages through Service Bus. I've only started 3 consumers here. They can each only pick up 2 message sessions each. And so right now, the message sessions that I'm not subscribed to aren't getting picked up. If I start another one, that's 3 and 9 started. Right, so we can keep, try to move that window out of the way. So we've got a few running. If I type up again, this one, I think there's possibly only one left. There's none left at the moment. So there are no sessions available for this one to pick up. So it's not actually going to do any work. And so similar to the way that we see a distributed log kind of processor not doing anything once all the partitions are allocated. Once all our sessions are allocated and we start more competing consumers, they actually don't have any work to do, because when they start that session processor, they connect to Service Bus and say, give me a session to process, and there are no sessions available for us. It will do the kind of failover with these. So this one is customer 1. If I kill that one, what we'll probably see is Service Bus will notice that, and then this processor here will get allocated that session. There'll be a little bit of a lag while it's paying attention, until it ensures that thing's offline. But here we see session initializing async for 1, and this one has taken up that extra set of messages. If I type quit here, we'll end up killing them all for us. And so we can do, we can have a little bit more control. As I said, I commented that out now. If I run it again, I think that will take effect. I think the way the project's set up, it takes an extra build to get that over there. So if I type up now, we'll see that this, okay, did a clean build this time. And now when I start the application, we'll see, I'll type up to start our consumer. And then what we've got here is that we've got 8 sessions been picked up. So we're not specifying how many for it to pick up. We just started the session processor, and then by default, they can pick up 8 sessions. And so what we're seeing now is we're able to process 8 sessions on this one. And so if I start now another one, there was only a couple left. There was 3 more because there are the 10 customer sessions and 1 for the messages that I type in. And now if I start another one, I didn't do anything because I typed up wrong. It won't do anything there. And again, in a similar way, if I start 2 waiting consumers up here, so I've got 2 things waiting now. If I kill off something that had 8 consumers on it, they actually get distributed across these 2 that were waiting here, right? So this one picked up 4 in total, and this one's picked up 3 so far in total. This one I picked up 1. Well, we have to wait for another message to come on that last one. Probably that's why it's not been picked up, because there's not an active message waiting on it. But it was able to do that load balancing for us once we kind of get there. Once we need to, right? So if we start a bunch of consumers and there's a bunch of sessions outstanding, it'll spread that load for us nicely. The thing I will show you is the up processor. Sorry, the timeout, the closing. So we do have, I go into the queue receiver, we do have this other configuration option we can set, which is the session idle timeout. So I set that, I think that's a time span. Yep. So if I do timespan.from seconds and set that to 10, so that means if we don't get a message for 10 seconds on that session, we'll consider that session to be timed out and we won't bother consuming from it anymore. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start the application again. Oh, I've still got some of them running. That was my problem last time, is that they were running in the background. Let me just do it again one more time. And so now if I type up, so this one's picked up the typed one. So that's what I type into the console and it received the up message. And then after a few seconds, what we'll see after 10 seconds is what I typed in, we should see a session closing. So no message came in on that one, which means we're freeing ourselves up to have to pick up another session. So that session closed because it was idle. There weren't any messages sent there in the 10 seconds, which is the timeout I set. It actually happened again with session 5 as well. So what we're able to do is it noticed that it wasn't getting any messages, and so it closed down that session because it wasn't active, and then it's free to pick up another one. And so when the typed one closed down, we picked up session 8, and when the session 5 closed down, we picked up session 1. Happened here again with 3. No message sent to 3, so we picked up session 2. And so this is enabling us to have a consumer that's kind of swapping over to kind of help spread that load out there. We can shorten that time span a little bit, depending on, in your business case, how frequently you'd expect to go a certain amount of time without messages. You can shrink some of that time and help with that load balancing. What the sessions is guaranteeing us is that we will close that session before anybody else picks it up. So with a regular competing consumers, the messages get picked up by anybody. And so I could pick up message 1 for the customer 1, and somebody else could pick up message 2 for customer 1, and they could process it entirely before me. They could beat me in a race to process that message, and it would look like it got processed out of order. With sessions, it will prevent that from happening, because once I picked up message 1, it means I've got the session and somebody else won't be able to pick that session up. So me as a consumer, I'll make sure I process all the messages for customer 1 in order. That other person will just pick up messages for customer 2 instead. So you can see this is happening relatively frequently here. This is happening because I'm using random numbers for the customer IDs. And so it just so happens I'm going up 10 seconds without generating a 7 or a 5 or something like that. And that's why we're getting these kind of session resets. If I start another consumer, so we don't have a ton of pressure, this will pick up the kind of slack ones. And then sessions will close down, but we won't see them picking others up. So there, the session's closed, but there's actually none available to pick up. So we've just closed them because they're not that useful for us to process. We want to be available for more sessions. But then what happens here is a message did come in. So here we closed 3 because there was nothing on it. Once we generated another message for 3, that session got picked up again by the consumer. So that's a decent walkthrough, I think, I hope, of how we process messages sent to kind of queues. The big difference for the sender is you need to set the session ID, and that will make sure that it goes into that session. If you've got partitions turned on, you just have to set the session ID still, and that will be the partition ID too. And then for the receiver, the big difference is when we create our processor, we're creating a session processor instead of just creating a processor, and that gives us these other couple of messages or events to handle about when we connect to a session and when we disconnect from a session. The other thing I think is important to show, let me kill off all these extra ones because I keep forgetting to type quit into the main one. I just hit stop because it's a problem when you build. The other thing that's worthwhile showing is if we take a look at how this works with topics. So when we create a topic, there is no checkbox to turn on sessions for topics, which is kind of interesting because for queues you have to turn it on when you create them. But sessions is, as I said before, sessions is mainly about the receipt of messages, and topics are mainly about sending messages. So we don't actually have this on the topic. So I've created a topic which I called session topic, but it isn't actually a session. There isn't actually a kind of checkbox to check, but my subscriptions on here will be. So here I set up a session subscription. If I go to add another subscription, you'll see this is where I check enable sessions. Here we go. So I can check enable sessions, and then that makes sure that we've got sessions on that subscription. So I've already done that with this session topic. And so what I can do in this in the source code, and this will be on my GitHub, so you can come and take a look at this. At the top here, I could just swap this over to say use topics instead of sessions. And what we'll start to see is this will actually work exactly the same way. So all the same behaviors that we exhibited with queues will have exhibited with topics as well. But there is one noticeable difference, which I'll show you in a second. So I started a couple of processes here. This one's not getting any sessions yet because I guess we haven't got any messages come through. We've only used 8 customer numbers so far. What did this one get? Let me scroll to the top. This one, I actually got this set a little differently. So this is a slightly different class, a session topic receiver. And up here, I've got in my receiver options, let me scroll up slightly so I can see it easier. I've got the max concurrent session set to 20. So the first one is picked up all of our sessions. And the other one just waits, right? And so if I kill the first one, Service Bus will take a second to realize that it's kind of timed out, the connection's down, and then we will, this thing will start picking up the sessions and taking over the processing. So I'll run that again this time. We'll see the same behavior. I'll call up. That'll take all the sessions that are available. I'll call up again, and this one, it hasn't got anything possible to do. If I kill that first one, we'll see that second one will take over. So we can still do things like hot standbys, and we can do, with shorter idle timeouts, we can do more leveling. All that kind of stuff is the same. The one thing I will say that is different, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here to where I type in my up and down. So when I type in up and down, remember I'm sending that with the session ID typed. If I take that out, so I'm not sending that with the session ID typed, let's see what happens. So I will start the message sender again. Yeah, up. Oh wait, I didn't properly kill that last time. Let me just start again. Type up. So notice I didn't pick up a typed one there, even though I sent a message. Up. Still not picking up a typed one. Send more messages to this topic. So what's happening here? I'm not actually getting an error like before when I sent without a session ID on a queue. I got an error, and that's because we've said that queue is enabled for sessions. So we know at the sending point and at the receiving point it's enabled for sessions. The difference you get with topics and subscriptions, and I'll show this here, is when we send to a topic without a session ID and we have a subscription that uses session IDs, any messages that arrive at that subscription that don't have a session ID are immediately dead lettered. So they are unreceivable on that. And so if we go into Service Bus Explorer and so we're going to peek the dead letter and peek, this will grab us a message. So these are some of those messages from the dead letter queue. And so this is our first up message. And then we go up, hello, more message to this topic, right? That's what I typed in. What we're seeing here is that the reason for dead lettering is it's a session enabled entity, the session ID is null. Right, and so Service Bus is dead lettering that message immediately because we can't allocate that to a receiver, and so there isn't a good way for us to be able to receive that message. So if you have a topic that you want to be able to process session-based messages, but there might be some publishers that are sending non-session-based messages, you're going to need to set up a non-session-based subscription, so you're able to receive those messages. But again, the code is really very similar. The reason there are 2 classes here for the queue and topic is because I have to literally just pass in the extra variable for subscriptions. But you still do the same thing. You create a Service Bus session processor, and then you're able to set the maximum number of concurrent sessions. You can also, it's exactly the same thing, set the same session timeout and stuff like that, and you get the same event handlers. The only difference is when you call create processor while passing the topic and subscription instead of just the queue name. If you look on this one, when I'm calling that method, I'm only passing the queue name. And so hopefully you found that a good intro for how you send and receive messages on Service Bus using sessions. If you did, please like the video. If you've got any feedback, please drop it in the comments below. Subscribe for more videos and hit post notifications, and YouTube will tell you when I post more videos. In the meantime, hit me up on any one of these kind of social links, and I'll see you next time. Thanks. Bye-bye.